Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. All right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start with this first. I had an individual reach out to me on Gab, and they facilitate a website that is called armreg.co.uk. That's armreg.co.uk. I will link this in the description below of this particular episode, but they reached out to me in the digital messages and they asked me if I would promote this particular website and the books that are available on their website. And I immediately took a look at it and I said, yeah, absolutely. They said they can't monetarily compensate me for promoting this, and I said, no problem. You don't have to. So I'll introduce it by saying this. If you've seen Europa: The Last Battle, then you've seen this particular book series because it was actually highlighted, certainly from a visual standpoint, within that documentary, and I'm sure it's within a number of other documentaries. But I bounced over on their website, and I'm right here on the About Us page, and I just want to read this very quickly so that you can get a taste as to what is on this website. You talk about real history and real documentation and real books and a real book series and, again, numerous books that that would be fantastic for anyone's library. Certainly if you're homeschooling your children and you know that the history that we were taught in school is not real and is not the truth. So here's what it says over there again at armreg.co.uk. It says, our academic research media review education group, LTD, ARMREG, was established in mid-2023. It aims at supporting independent, critical academic research, media review, and education in the field of Holocaust studies. It says in Western countries, the field of Holocaust studies is highly regulated by penal laws, government regulations, and non-governmental acceptable use policies. Views deviating from what is commonly considered acceptable, quote-unquote, are suppressed by almost all forces of society. Some 20 Western countries have outlawed dissent, making it a crime punishable with up to 20 years in prison to voice peaceful views not aligned with the orthodox, quote-unquote, narrative. All Western and many non-Western societies ostracize anyone publicly voicing dissent, ruining their reputation and carriers in the process. Media companies ban dissent. Book distributors and vendors such as Ingram Content Group, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble exclude dissident literature from their platforms. Social media platforms such as YouTube, Vimeo, X/Twitter, and Facebook delete dissenting posts and close accounts responsible for them. There is no freedom of speech in Western countries when it comes to this topic. The orthodoxy can spread whatever they like about this chapter of history. Any attempt is suppressed that tries to teach the general public that it is this field of research, like in any other, opinion monopolies always lead to the dissemination of half-truths and lies. ARMREG tries building a platform that allows dissenting Holocaust scholars willing to speak out to reach a wider audience without fear of retribution. Unquote. And again, here's what they have. They have the Holocaust handbooks in both print form and in PDF ebook available. Again, a massive series of books on the lies of the Holocaust and its history and the whole thing. They're all right here. They also, of course, have audiobooks as well that are downloadable, as it seems. They have another one that is called the Holocaust Encyclopedia. Again, it looks like what you would typically find within an American K-12 school. It's basically a textbook of sorts. It looks rather thick, but again, it goes over the history and the lies associated with all of it. Which again, this right here again is the entire point, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is beyond necessary. So Again, one of the individuals associated with this group, or the individual associated with this group, reached out to me and just wanted me to make mention of this on my show and include this in any discussion going forward. I said, absolutely, I certainly would. Again, the number of books that exist on this website are massive. There are a number of them, and there's no denying it. This is very important, again, for, I believe, anyone's library, and certainly the homeschooling family and individuals who, again, want to teach their children the truth about what really goes on as compared to, of course, the lies that we were all taught and fed in American K-12 school and certainly university settings. Again, you can go to colleges and universities now, as we all know, and you can major in subjects that are not real. You can get bachelor's and master's degrees in subjects that are based on lies, and even historic lies, such as, of course, the Holocaust and Auschwitz and 1,000 other subjects, everything related to World War II and the time before then as well. But this website is fantastic. It cuts through the lies. It has the documentation, the books, the references, and the resources to back it all up, and I highly recommend checking this out. Again, this is armreg.co.uk, and I will link this in the description below. And again, I'm not a paid endorser of this website. They aren't monetarily compensating me at all for this. So I just know a good site when I see it, and one that has all of the resources available on it, I think, again, that anyone can learn from. This is certainly the place to go. Not to mention, it's a conversation starter. I mean, someone starts to talk about a particular subject, in particular the Holocaust, and you look at them and you say, okay, so you think that all that happened, and then, of course, they get that weird look on their face, like they can't believe what you just said, and you say, okay, well, what about this then? And you show them this website. And then slowly but surely, whether they like it or not, and they may scream like a demon or run away, who knows? But either way, just like that in the blink of an eye, they'll be shown something that they didn't even think existed. Again, a massive book series and numerous texts breaking down how this wasn't real, how it was a communist Bolshevistic lie. Of course, driven by Jews and other entities and bankers for the purposes of profit and deception and Satanism and 1,000 other things. So it's a conversation piece as well, which is great. But again, true history has to be taught, and this is a great place to begin that journey. So go ahead and check it out. Again, I will link it in the description below. One more time, it's armreg.co.uk. Okay, let's get into it now. I came across this visual on one of the chat boards that I frequent from time to time, and it makes perfect sense. And I think it exemplifies numerous examples of what we're hearing and what we're seeing today, in particular, again, with the language that people are using and, of course, the behavior that they're engaging in. Ultimately, again, as I've said both publicly and in writing, everything that we are witnessing is all due to lying. It's constant lies from numerous angles, but with this particular visual, which you're going to have to, of course, imagine this in your mind. It's kind of a Venn diagram, but not really. It's more of just a two-column diagram here. But on one side of the diagram, from top to bottom, at the very top it says, under the influence of evil. And then on the right side, it says, advanced state of mental slavery. The very first word under both of those columns is the word lies. And then when those lies reach the conscious mind, something happens. Something happens again with a person's mind. Something happens with their behavior, their emotions, their facial expressions. We've all seen this with people. When you introduce the truth, to them, when they, of course, believe something that is not real, they will quite literally walk away. They will scream. They will shout. They will not ask questions. These are the kinds of behaviors that people engage in. So on the left-hand column, the first column, and there's only two here, the first column, again, is titled Under the Influence of Evil. When you introduce lies into the conscious mind, as this particular diagram suggests, The conflict between lies and truth, what's real and what isn't, exists between the space of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And so what it says here specifically is conflict between conscious and unconscious weakens, disempowers, makes easier to manipulate and control, enslaving to fulfill their satanic agenda. And then, if you have God's voice on the bottom, for example, and then the unfallen mind and heart interacting with truth, that comes up into the conscious mind and then ultimately into the conscious mind, which is where it impacts with the lies. And this is where the conflict exists, again, under the influence of evil. In the second column, under the advanced state of mental slavery, the implication is that the lies have made their way past the conscious mind and well past the unconscious mind. They're past the ability to even think about what they're doing, so much so that they don't even think about the lies that are being handed their way. They just believe them. So the conflict actually exists at a far deeper level then, which is the actual conscience of an individual, which is closer to the unfallen mind and heart, which is closer, of course, to God's voice. This is referred to, according to this individual who put this together, as the deeper conflict, where the unconscious now controlled by lies, and that the conscience in conflict or not functioning. So again, they lose the ability to even think because they've believed the lies so deeply and for so long that they actually lack the ability to comprehend anything, and they just blindly believe what they hear. Not, of course, from truth tellers, that's the whole point, which is why that's where the conflict exists. It's not the truth tellers that they believe. They're far more likely to believe individuals who are lying to them and then interpret that as being the truth. It says that these individuals are then cut off from the true nature and God's love, and they are enslaved by power, evil emotions, and ideas. Again, I think that this is manifest in so many ways that people behave, the way that they talk, the way that they communicate, 1,000 things. I've had people reach out to me, not often, but occasionally in particular chat boards, and all they do is name call. That's it. They don't read anything that I've written. They don't watch the things that I suggest that they watch. They're incapable of thought. So what do they actually do? They just name call because that's all they have. And they're actually name calling about lies. And they're making up lies to create an insult that they think is an insult when in fact it's not an insult at all. They've lost the ability to think. Now, as you might expect, I have numerous examples, recent examples certainly, that I can use to bring this immediately to bear here. And for the Canadian listeners, and frankly for everybody, there of course is this one, which has been making the rounds for quite some time now. But this was from Breitbart, and it was titled Justin Trudeau's Canada. Proposed law may allow life imprisonment for online speech crimes. We're actually seeing this particular narrative, so to speak. I hate that word, but we're seeing it time and time again and being pushed into the mainstream time and time again, so much so that, of course, there's this recent story, and it may be fake, it may not actually be real, of even in the United States, police officers going after a group of middle school or high school students because they are making fun of other students online, calling them names and attempting to have some kind of a pseudo-slave auction or whatever it is. But again, it's inappropriate. But the point is they're having these conversations online, and then they're bringing criminal charges against these minors for the conversations that they're having. Again, speech crimes, so to speak. It's beyond unconstitutional, certainly here in the United States, but specifically with Canada. This particular article goes on and it says a proposed law in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Canada will reportedly allow judges to throw adults in jail for life if they advocate for genocide online. advocate for genocide. This was also reported by Fox News last Thursday. The Online Harms Act, Bill C-63, would permit life sentences. The article also said, quote, the law would allow a provincial judge to impose house arrest and a fine if there were reasonable grounds to believe a defendant will commit an offense, quote unquote. Again, content that sexually victimizes a child or re-victimizes a survivor. This is part of their act that they claim they are specifically going to target 7 types of harmful content. So again, anything that sexually victimizes a child or re-victimizes a survivor. The next one that they have listed is intimate content communicated without consent, content used to bully a child, content that induces a child to harm themselves, content that foments hatred, content that incites violence, and finally, content that incites violent extremism or terrorism. Now again, let me go back to that example again of the so-called school children in the American school who are being allegedly, the 6 students who are allegedly being brought up on charges for, again, communicating similar things in an online environment. My first question, of course, is it an accident that both of these things in 2 separate countries, in 2 neighboring countries, happened at the exact same time? Is that a coincidence? Or is this some coordinated effort to get this message out there that legal individuals, so to speak, certainly those who believe to be themselves in charge, are coming after minors or anyone who they deem to be dangerous in an online environment? And is this even legal? I think that's the first thing. People have to understand that there is usually a scheme behind all of this and that it's not an accident. This is, again, part of the brainwashing. This is part of the normalizing of a particular story or a wavelength of thought that they want to get out there. The next thing is when I read these bullet points from Canada, I think to myself, well, they can make this up anytime they want. They can quite literally fabricate it out of thin air. Individuals in law enforcement can say, without any proof, that somebody said something, and then that alone, without even bringing any charges, what does that do? Well, that manipulates the stakeholders, and it manipulates the legislators, and it manipulates then the formation of law, and then it manipulates the actual law being written, and then it manipulates the law being passed. And not a single arrest has taken place. Fake school shootings, same thing. They do the exact same thing with that storyline and that script to accomplish the exact same thing. There doesn't have to be actual proof or clues or evidence that there was actually a murder. There just has to be a story. And then the story, of course, leads to law, ultimately. All based on a lie. Not to mention, again, when I read these bullet points from Canada, I think to myself, they're coming after straight white people who may be online making fun of gays, trannies, bisexuals, you name it. Pedophiles, for example. If you make fun of a pedophile online, and that individual hurts themselves because they say that you made fun of them, then you're going to be brought up on charges. This is, again, it can't get more communistic than this. It can't get more Bolshevistic. This is exactly what they have planned. And they're doing this step by step, as we know. They've been doing it for a very long time, and they're not going to take their foot off the gas. They're going to swing for the fences on just about everything. And again, it's an election year, and we all know that. But they're just going to keep swinging for the fences no matter what. And I just wanted to, again, sort of mention that here right off the top because, well, that's what they're going to do. They have to. They got to throw everything up against the wall to see what sticks. And they've got to do whatever they can to at least make some inroads in the minds of some. And one of the ways, of course, that they do that is through fear. And they manufacture the fear in order to, again, get people to react a particular way. Because they know that the reaction is as predictable as the script that they write. So there's that. Um, that moves me to this, actually. I wanna make mention of this. And again, you heard me say this in the last episode. When it comes to the fake school shootings, which again is difficult for people to wrap their heads around because again, they're way past the ability to think, as I brought up earlier. But as I said in a previous episode regarding Uvalde, the news has to bring back these kinds of stories, in particular the fake ones, with regularity, because they have to keep it fresh in people's minds. They have to re-torture people. Again, it's the ritualistic torture. It has to come back in some form or fashion to keep it at the forefront of everybody's wavelength of thought to some extent. Usually takes a few months. It'll go away. Some story about some fake shooting will go away, and then it'll come on back, in particular when it has to do with schools. They did this again just the other day. Not just with Uvalde last week, but they just did it again with Nashville. So now what we have is we have a judge, allegedly, asking the FBI to provide this so-called shooter manifesto, coined the Tranny-festo, to a news outlet. Now again, let's run through that order of operations very quickly, and then ask yourself the question, are we all supposed to just now trust these three variables in this equation? Are we supposed to now trust, based on this story, again, all the stories that have been written about not trusting these people, now all of the sudden, when it comes to something like this, in particular a school shooting, quote unquote, where children died and a principal fought for her life and blah, blah, blah. None of that, of course, happened because there's no evidence that shows that. So now all of the sudden, are we supposed to believe judges, the FBI, and the news media? Again, keeping in mind that we don't trust those outlets, and we make a living not trusting those outlets, and talking about and writing about not trusting those outlets, but now we have to trust them. So this is from justthenews.com with old John Solomon. Again, titled, Judge Orders FBI to Provide Covenant Shooters Manifesto to News Outlet. It says Star News sued the FBI in May of 2023, claiming that the Bureau had violated the First Amendment by rejecting multiple Freedom of Information Act requests for the manifesto. I have a bigger question. How about we get the actual surveillance footage of the shooter actually killing somebody? How about that? We haven't seen that. Why doesn't that exist? We saw body cam footage of what allegedly showed police officers shooting and killing this so-called shooter, but that's all we saw. We saw what looked like a drill taking place with this particular individual. Again, I didn't see any shell casings. I saw glass break with this individual shooting through glass. We saw that. We saw a lot of gun pointing. We saw a lot of running. We saw broken policy everywhere. Nothing made sense. And then you allegedly see this Audrey Elizabeth Hale drop to the ground after allegedly being shot by these officers. So again, if you're going to do a Freedom of Information Act request, why not request the actual surveillance footage of them going through the hallway and allegedly killing at least 2 students? Haven't seen that. So here's what the article says. Again, it says a federal judge ordered the FBI to provide Covenant school shooter Audrey Hale's manifesto and other documents for a private review as part of a lawsuit from Star News Digital Media, Inc., the parent company of the Tennessee Star. Quote, the court's order today is a significant victory for the public's right to know about the motives of Audrey Elizabeth Hale, who murdered 6 innocent Nashvillians at the Covenant School on March 27th of 2023. So said the Tennessee Star editor-in-chief Michael Patrick Leahy, if I'm saying his name right. Star News sued the FBI in May of 23, claiming that the Bureau had violated the First Amendment by rejecting multiple Freedom of Information Act requests for the manifesto, and Hale's 2023 massacre targeted the Covenant School and resulted in the deaths of 3 students and 3 faculty members. It says that the court also finds that the significant public interest in both the requested materials and the law enforcement objectives asserted by the FBI support in-camera review, and that no showing has been made that the requested material will be so voluminous that it would pose a significant danger to judicial economy, quote unquote, wrote the U.S. District Court Judge Alida A. Trauger in the Friday order. It says in November of last year, conservative commentator Stephen Crowder published leaked pages of the manifesto that included a number of white writings, they say, and Hale was a biological female that signed the journal entries under the name Aiden. Doesn't matter. None of it matters. All this does is keep the story in the limelight, to revisit it and bring it back to re-traumatize and re-brainwash. That's the point. They're making the wrong complaint. They're making the wrong Freedom of Information Act request. They're asking for something that they have no proof that was actually written by this person. And even if it was this person an MKUltra victim? Were they a mental patient? Were they being monitored specifically? Were they told that you're going to walk into this building and shoot up the place? Only then, of course, to not actually shoot anybody, but then be cornered and then be shot. Who's to say? Who's to say? See, I'm doing the thing that the non-thinking person doesn't do, which is ask questions. Because I wasn't there. I didn't see it happen. All I did when it happened was notice all of the anomalies and all of the broken policy and the Masonic imagery everywhere and the inconsistencies. And then, of course, the inconsistencies with the statements and the involvement of the people who are involved. And then, of course, the behavior of individuals. And then getting actors involved and blah, 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 blah. Again, this is a ruling from a judge who's asking for something that they can't provide. And if they can provide it, it doesn't have to be real what they provide. It can be completely manufactured. I went over those couple of pages that so-called Stephen Crowder, in his infinite wisdom, provided the public, and they were ridiculous. They were ridiculous. Again, this alleged shooter wrote down what they were going to eat for breakfast. They were like, wake up in the morning, put on my tennis shoes, I'm going to wear this sweater, then I'm going to eat this bowl of cereal, then I'm going to go kill people. I mean, it made no sense. I'm not saying it has to make sense. Whoever this person was, they clearly weren't well. But either way, this judge is asking for something that is not consequential. It doesn't matter. It can easily be fabricated. That's unfortunately the world we live in, and even more unfortunate, people don't know that. They don't know that we live in a world where the media, the judicial system, and so-called law enforcement can work together to tell you whatever they want to tell you. And then it doesn't have to be real in the slightest. So I just wanted to mention that again. It's beyond alarming, but we can expect this particular subject to be revisited on a constant basis. So there's that. That brings me to this now. James Crumbley. James Crumbley was found guilty by a so-called jury of his peers of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for a crime he did not commit. He, of course, is the second half of the Crumbley parents, who is now facing upwards of, 15 years in jail on 4 counts of felonious involuntary manslaughter for the deaths of 4 people and the wounding of at least 7 others at the hands of their son. Now, I didn't watch the trial. Again, full disclosure, I didn't see it. Wasn't that interested. What I do know is that there's way more misleading going on in this entire trial. And with the prosecution, you can see it in the prosecution's faces. I mean, these people are dirty. McDonald and the other guy. They're just dirty. But either way, they alluded after the trial that they were potentially, I should say, going to hold school officials accountable and that they might prosecute and bring up criminal charges of the school officials who had a job to do and didn't do their job either. And then they immediately backed off of that the very next morning. They said, no, we're not going to bring charges. Sorry, we were just kidding. And I should mention this too, that within the trial itself, I did catch this particular part. They, of course, brought up very similar witnesses, certainly from the police department, because again, the police department was working with the prosecutor's office as they tend to. They're in each other's back pockets. It's not like they're going to work against each other. And then what they ended up doing is they ended up reading snippets of the 22 pages of Ethan Crumbley's journal, where in it, which by the way, none of it was a surprise, because much of it was alluded to, if not directly mentioned in the mother's trial, that Ethan had written in there on at least one occasion that he claims that he asked his parents for help, but that they ignored him or blew him off or didn't take him seriously. Well, that doesn't matter, really. Even that element of it doesn't matter, because in the same journal, he openly admitted that he was going to have to find the gun that his father hid in order to engage in the crime. So there's an admission from Ethan Crumbley that some people want to believe regarding asking his parents for help, and yet there's another admission that the father hid the gun, that Ethan didn't know where it was, and that Ethan would essentially have to steal it in order to engage in a crime. But they don't want to focus on that aspect of it. They just want to focus on the part that had to do with, well, Ethan asked for help and you didn't give it to him. Because remember, when a child writes something in a journal, it must be true. Now, this was a part of the trial that I thought was beyond corrupt and beyond ridiculous. They could have, at any moment in the mother's trial or the father's trial, although they ruled against it in the pretrial hearings, that Ethan was not allowed to testify for or against his parents and bring him to the stand and ask him questions. If they had, he'd have probably said something like, which is why they didn't allow it, he'd have probably said, my parents had nothing to do with this. They didn't know I was going to do this. I didn't tell them I was going to do this. I stole the gun from my parents. I killed those students. This was my idea, not theirs. They're innocent. You can't have him on the stand saying that. In a trial, rather, that is designed to hang the parents publicly, to send a message across the bow, certainly to any white parents. Because again, keep in mind, they're not going after black parents who are, again, the parents of gun-owning children or children who are in the same home as a gun that they possess to then take said gun and go engage in a crime. They're not arresting those parents. They arrested the Crumbleys. And they arrested them, I might add, unlawfully. Now, I know that there was a warrant out for their arrest immediately while they were sleeping, and they were going to turn themselves in the next day. But they, of course, painted this giant picture that they were running away and blah, blah, blah. I've been over the whole thing. The point is that the inconsistencies from the mother's trial were the same in the father's trial. He was never going to get a fair shake after after his wife's verdict. And of course, it's taking place in the exact same county, in the exact same courtroom, same courthouse, same judge. No chance. This is government, ladies and gentlemen. They want us all hung by the neck. They want us all out there for everybody to see, and they believe that they are above the law because they're making it up as they go. It was 2 back-to-back trials based on emotion. And the most brainwashed people, again, continue to be the individuals who continue to send their children to that school district, which is literally the scene of 4 murders. And they expect something different to happen. They expect something else to change. You have got to be kidding me. That actually brings me to this. This was thrown my way. I'm going to leave names out of this on purpose because I don't want to out this particular individual. But this was thrown my way from some parent group in that general area of Oxford, Michigan, if memory serves. And here's what it says. It says, "Hello, my name is whatever. I live here. I'm a parent, and my kids don't attend the same school district. It too is a very bad situation due to a bad situation that happened last year. I went to our school board in addition to the Michigan Department of Education school board." Jesse James threw this my way, by the way. All credit to him. And he said, and it's not him writing this, but it was someone else. And they said they spoke at both specifically about holding schools and staff accountable, and that oversight, compliance, safety, and consequences for gross negligence. Again, to that I say good luck. They're insulated. They're insulated. They're a government entity. Schools are a government entity. Government isn't going to hang one of their own entities. It doesn't work that way. They defend them to the bone against you, the people. That's what happens here. It says, due to our situation, this individual, who is Nikki Snyder, it says, who is a state school board member, reached out to them after their public comments. And she said that I have kept in contact and that she will be holding a press conference in the near future addressing the legislation, or that legislation rather, must be changed to provide safe schools for all, and that there be accountability and liability when they aren't. Well, first of all, none of them are safe. Have you not figured this out? 4 murders took place there, and it should have been more. After reading the Guidepost report, it could have been much more. But they're not safe, and they're never going to be. They go on and they say, hearing the judge and prosecutor state that schools will not be held liable was a gut punch, to say the least, and adds more fuel to changing laws and getting away from automatic immunity. Again, you got to live under a rock to not know what's really going on in the world. And this proves it, unfortunately. And it's sad. It says, topics she would like to address include my son's story pertaining to special education seclusion and restraint, a safety issue causing death when a recalled faulty table fell on a child resulting in death, a student who recently passed away at lunch due to choking because no one was trained in CPR, and she would like to have folks there representing the incident in Oxford. If you would like more information, please send me a message. Thank you. Unquote. First of all, if someone is choking, you don't use CPR, you use the Heimlich maneuver. And if a person doesn't know how to do the Heimlich maneuver, you live under a rock. But again, it's the scene of a crime. It's a criminal organization. You know, I've brought this example up before, as have numerous individuals, and I'm going to bring it up again because it's too perfect. 2 examples. If an anonymous person writes a negative review about a restaurant and says, don't go there, the service is bad, the food is terrible, and the ambiance isn't desirable, you're going to read that and not go. You're not even going to check it out based on your own curiosity. You might if you're a curious person, and you'll go once and you'll look around and whatever. You'll just believe it, typically, and not even waste your money or waste your time and go, oh, thanks for telling me. I'm glad, and now I'll just pick somewhere else. And then you don't go, more times than not. And then, of course, there's the old example of, if you saw a gang of Italian mobsters, or just stereotypical Italians, standing outside of a pizza joint on the corner of a street, and they're all standing around and they're smoking, and they look the way that they do in Goodfellas, or back in the, whatever it was, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you name it. And they're all just standing around. Is that the place you're going to go for a slice of pizza? Is that where you're going to send your kids without your supervision? And say, okay, kids, get on out and head on over into there and enjoy your pizza. Is that what you're going to do? Because that's what parents do every single day when they're sending their children to American schools. It's the same thing. In fact, it's so backwards, I can't even believe I'm saying this. It's so backwards that on Gateway Pundit just the other day, there was a story about how California schools are seeking to do away with Doritos and Cheetos as food in their cafeterias in K-12 schools across the state because it's either costing them too much money or it's poison or whatever. And both of those are correct. While delicious, they're poison. It's not good food. It's not healthy. But it was being reported as if it was some communistic takeover of their schools. They're already communistic. Who cares if they do away with potato chips that are unhealthy for people? That's actually a step in the right direction. But it's being twisted in the minds of it's an infringement on your rights. This is the constant mental battle that is constantly taking place with numerous stories and numerous points of view that we're all just supposed to blindly believe that everything is tyranny when not everything is tyranny. And at the same time, we're supposed to believe that everything is safe when it clearly is not. So that's my 2 cents on that. Again, very disappointing because, again, the effort that these parents are putting into barking up the government tree in an effort to get them to change their ways is a waste of energy and a waste of time. If they just took that energy and they understood, and this is the big problem, the understanding. If they understood that if they took that energy and they put it into getting on YouTube and watching the occasional YouTube video on homeschooling or home learning and what that really means, they would actually find out that it requires less participation on their part than the lack of participation that they're already engaging in with their own children when they send them to American public, private, and charter schools. Because again, let's face it, in this day and age, certainly in society now, many parents don't even pay attention to what their kids are learning in school. They don't ask their children. They don't follow up with their teachers or anybody else as to the day in and day out assignments that are taking place. The child comes home and says, I don't have any homework, everything is fine. The parents believe them. A grade card comes home, it looks like they have decent grades. The parents don't ask any further questions. They say congratulations, and they just believe that everything that's being done in the building is correct, and that everything that's being done in the environment is morally sound and accurate. But we know otherwise. So there's, again, I've been over it a million times, but there's the flipping of the mind that has to take place with these parents when it comes to where they're putting their energy, if they even have energy, and they're not completely pacified to death. But they're putting their energy in the wrong place. A tragedy occurred in a school district, and they put their energy into the tragedy rather than protecting their child by pulling them away from the environment where the tragedy took place, even when there's no accountability from the people who worked in the environment who facilitated the entire tragedy. I mean, that is a certain kind of special. And I don't have an answer for that one other than full-blown brainwashing. In fact, as one would expect, that leads me to this next story, where you're going to hear full-blown brainwashing also. We'll not hear it, but I'll certainly read it, and you'll hear it from me. This is from the Washington Examiner, and it was titled, Fairfax Students Allowed to Opt Out of Holocaust Survivors Lecture by a Jenny Goldsberry. Fairfax, Virginia, ladies and gentlemen. It says middle school students in Fairfax County Public Schools were given the option to sit out on a Holocaust Survivors Lecture. Yes, I'm sure it's thrilling. Cooper Middle School will host a Holocaust survivor on March 18th. That's right, Monday, here we are. To talk to 7th grade students, a subsequent email was sent to parents assuring them that the lecture was not mandatory and that a quote-unquote alternative assignment could be provided upon request. We understand that all students have different experiences, quote-unquote, the email read. And if you prefer to opt your child out from participating in this presentation, please email your child's history teacher, and they will provide an alternate assignment Please email your child's history teacher with any questions that you may have, unquote. Then there's this particular tweet, which is rather hilarious. In fact, before I read the tweet, let me finish with the article here. It says that this lecture apparently is an annual tradition. Oh, well, there you go. You gotta make the brainwashing yearly. Has to be a year-round thing. It says, quote, some Jewish students have previously expressed discomfort while engaging in dialogue around this visit. For that reason, school leadership makes every effort to partner with the families of these students, who are 12 and 13 years old, to keep them informed, quote unquote, the statement read. It said, quote, this opt-out allows the family the opportunity to make the best informed decision on behalf of their student. Do you see how, again, the words that they use? I love word usage. I absolutely love it. Do you see how government tells the family that it's the family's student, but remember, it's government's child, it's government's kid. That, of course, government uses the word kids, our kids, but when they refer to the child belonging to the parent, it's the parent's student. Do you see how it's backwards? It's amazing. And I love, too, how they paint them, of course, these students as being Jewish students who are the victims. They don't want to be victimized by hearing about this again. This is a perfect example of when a student should walk in and ask the individual who's giving the presentation, have you heard of ARMREG? Have you heard of the Holocaust Handbook? Have you heard of the Jewish Encyclopedia? Are you aware of these publications? How is it that you can give a presentation like this and references with research that's historic exists on the other side of the so-called spectrum? That's asking a lot of a middle school student, clearly. But the point is that this right here is the hypocrisy and the brainwashing of the entire environment. In fact, so much so that if you brought that information to bear in a lecture like that during a Q&A, you would get booed out of the room. They would cut your microphone. They would throw you out. They might even discipline you. Isn't that the dead giveaway that something's not right? Now, here was a particular X post from someone, an Adele Scalia, and they said the following, quote, a Holocaust survivor is coming to speak to my son's 7th grade history class on Monday. Wonderful. What's less than wonderful, though, is the opt-out for this lesson because, quote, we understand that all students have different experiences, unquote. And then they said, what does that even mean? See, this is an individual who does not think. This is an individual, a parent, who is the tool of government. And all they're doing is perpetuating these historic lies with their own child, and then, of course, putting it out there on X for other people to see as well. In fact, I bounced over to the comments section, and it's rather embarrassing. It's basically everybody supporting the parent and, other people commenting on what their teachers said, and, not everybody has the shared experience, and sometimes it causes people to revisit old harsh memories that they don't want to, think about ever again, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, hell. In the local school district where I live, they brought in a so-called astronaut who's been to the moon. No one's ever heard of this person. They've never even heard of this person. We've never been to the moon. Astronauts are fake. But he worked for NASA, and they had him on screen, and they were asking him questions, this old-timer, and, that was the end of it. Everybody just walked out of there like it was real. I wonder if anybody asked that person if it was, if it was fake. What's it like being a paid liar for NASA? And asking that question. See, you can't ask questions in school. Think about that. You can't ask who, what, where, when, why, and how. You're not allowed to do that. You'll literally be disciplined for thinking. That's why these places are completely unsafe for endless reasons. Which leads me to this, actually. I know we all like real history, certainly the listeners of this show, and God bless you for liking real history. This particular post came across my way, I found it fascinating. And it makes complete sense because, again, it spits in the face of the current storyline as we know it. It's referenced, and it's a nice little description of why is propaganda a bad word. Now, if you're interested in, again, the differences between good propaganda and bad propaganda, or positive and evil propaganda, there is a difference. Again, not all propaganda is bad propaganda, but it's, of course, been tailored in our society to be a bad word. That if you hear the word propaganda, instantly your mind goes to evil information, false information. This is not true. Here's what the Post says. It says, quote, "When a person mentions propaganda, quote unquote, the first thing most people think of is falsehoods told by the state, usually in a time of war, to manipulate the public to take some, often immoral action. It says, in short, it's a dirty word, but this wasn't always the case. It says propaganda, a good word. The word propaganda was first used in the 1600s to describe the efforts of the Roman Catholic Church to spread Catholicism to Protestant countries after the Reformation. It subsequently came to describe any attempt to spread a doctrine. However, the connotation of the word changed with the First World War. Then it says propaganda, World War I. With the outbreak of the war in 1914 saw the first widespread organized usage of propaganda. Many see World War I as the first total war, quote unquote, a war between nations rather than professional armies. As such, propaganda was used to, 3 points. Number 1, convince the public of the righteousness of the war. Number 2, identify the enemy. And number 3, highlight the ignoble qualities and actions of the enemy. Then it says British propaganda was particularly effective under the leadership of Lord Beaverbrook and Lord Northcliffe. Domestically, the British, it says, maintained severe censorship and a strict propaganda campaign. Especially persuasive and impactful was the quote-unquote atrocity propaganda, false claims of evil deeds and barbarism of the enemy, such as, has 5 points, German corpse factories for turning dead bodies into soap and fertilizer. Number 2, German soldiers cutting the hands off of Belgian babies. Number 3, German soldiers cutting the breasts off of Belgian women. Number 4, German soldiers crucifying Canadian soldiers. And number 5, 700,000 Serbians, women, children, and old men, killed in makeshift gas chambers by the Austrians and Bulgarians. It says none of the above happened. After World War I, the British public came to realize the extent of the lies of the government propaganda and thus came to distrust the word. It says Angus Fletcher, a British official, noted in 1928 that the word propaganda, quote unquote, was, quote, a good word gone wrong, debauched by the late Lorne Northcliffe, unquote. American institutions noted the fallout and wished to learn from it, as can be seen in the 1946 Rockefeller Foundation report, quote, the Committee on Studies of the Council on Foreign Relations is concerned that the debunking journalistic campaign following World War I should not be repeated, unquote. And then they said, answer, prior to World War I, propaganda had a good reputation, but it was tarnished by British lies during World War I, unquote. That right there is a history lesson you're never going to get in American school. In fact, the teaching of propaganda and what it actually meant used to be a college course, certainly after that particular time period. And then it went away. And look what it's been replaced with. It's been replaced with quite literally evil propaganda. The Bolshevistic, communistic agenda. All the studies that they have, all the gender, queer, this, that, and the other. All those. That's evil propaganda. Again, designed to get individuals to waste their time, suck their energy out, and focus on something that's completely manufactured, that is not rooted in any truth whatsoever. And there you have it. One last education story here. This, of course, touches on a very serious subject, which is continuing to be a massive problem. I've written about this at length before on Substack. Here it is yet again. This is from the Post-Millennial. Maryland teacher accused of sexually abusing children as young as 6 is illegal El Salvadorian immigrant who was previously deported twice, so says ICE. They've got a picture of the individual, and Irvin Giovanni Alfaro Lopez, 33, accused of sexually abusing at least 3 minors between the ages of 6 and 12 years old. Police said the abuse occurred between 2016 and 2018 at the Elam Gaithersburg Church, where he had been teaching at in Maryland. There you go. So a church takes in an illegal, has them teach children. What could possibly go wrong? In fact, focusing in on the church here for just a brief second, I've heard this now from a number of different individuals, some in the alternative media, of course, and then some in just basic conversation, but it's been openly discussed that, and we're kind of slipping into the jab talk now, and I have a number of stories to bring up as well. But there's this line of thinking out there, which of course is something that we've already seen take place with the church, which of course is the church went along with the entire quote-unquote COVID lie the first time around. There's a lot of chatter now discussing that the churches are going to double down on that lie if they try this one more time. If they try this again, either this year or after, with some impending Donald Trump victory, so to speak, if that even takes place, that they're basically going to bribe and coerce the churches in a way that they never have before to double down on any health measures that the government puts out there. Then you're really going to see a serious separation between the people in the church or between the church and government. So keep an eye out for that. Again, the church was not necessarily the friend of anybody during that entire time 4 years ago, and then, of course, the years after the fact, right up to the current time, because, again, their congregations have shrunk, endless people are sick, the prayers are all over the place, half the population is wearing the mask that attends these churches by and large, and they're still going. And I can't for the life of me figure out why, but again, it's right up there with brainwashing as to why people keep sending their children to American schools. Same thing. So anyway, keep that in mind going forward. Okay, let me mention this very quickly too. I've put together a document that I intend to send Sheriff Richard Jones. Now, anybody can look him up on the internet. I've covered him at length on the show here. He's the sheriff of Butler County, Ohio, where I live. Sheriff Jones, of course, as we all know, is completely out of touch. He doesn't know what's going on, he believes all the mainstream lies, and he rubs shoulders and rubs elbows with the feds in Washington, D.C. Claims to be a conservative, big mustache, big cowboy hat, but as the saying goes in Texas, he's all hat, no cattle, and therein lies the problem. So, starting on Monday, I am going to certify mail and request his signature to receive this document. Stone cold proof from both Karen Kingston, the expose, Dr. David Martin, and the laws that have been broken, how COVID isn't real, and that the shot is a literal biological weapon. All of it is collated, all of it is referenced, I've got all of it, and in fact, those documents exist on my website. You can check those out and print them off and tailor it to your particular county and your particular sheriff's department. Once he is in possession of these, he is in possession of the truth and evidence. Evidence. Those things that police officers are supposed to gather in order to then conduct an investigation and then potentially lead to criminal charges or something actually changing for the better. Now, Do I think this is going to move the needle in any way? No, I don't. I don't believe that it will. I'll pray that it does, but I think it's highly unlikely. I think that during an election year, as more people are taking these biological weapon shots under the guise of being a preventative medicine, Sheriff Richard Jones, who is running unopposed, which, by the way, I've already voted, and I didn't vote for him. I just left it blank. Remember, you can do that. You don't have to vote for these people if they run unopposed. But anyway, I didn't vote for him. I also didn't vote for the prosecutor who's running unopposed. And this was the guy who could have brought charges against the school teacher in the local school, local school district where I live, of course, where a business middle school teacher, groped a female student. That's called sexual assault. That's called sexual battery. Last time I heard, that usually implies that you'd have to arrest the individual, interview them, have multiple witnesses, conduct an investigation, and then charge them with a sexual crime, thereby making them a registered sex offender. This particular prosecutor chose not to even do any of that. So he's unfit for office, in my opinion. He's running unopposed. I didn't vote for him either. Either way, all of that aside, Richard Jones is going to get this. He's going to have to sign off for it. And that leads me actually to this. It leads me to a guy who is on BitChute, and he describes how he apparently talked with a sheriff, or the sheriff in his county, who met with Homeland Security. And you could make this up, I guess, but this, again, I have way more questions with this. So again, this is a thinking exercise, so let's all do it together. You've heard me first bring up in the past, I of course had a guest on the show who listens to the show. They know who they are, and they participated in one of these Homeland Security exercises, where again, there's a fake biological weapon. They had their blood taken. They ran through these particular PPE drills and 1,000 other things. And they, of course, had to go away from their workplace in order to do this. They were bused to this particular location. They were put up in a hotel, and they ran through these scenarios. As it turns out, as a result of, and I'm not kidding, the eclipse that's going to be taking place on April 8th, this particular individual describes, and I'll put it in the war video, in the next war video so you can see him talking about it, but it's about 13 plus minutes long. But he brings up how this sheriff in his county talked about Homeland Security ramping up their efforts to engage in what may end up being some kind of a attack during the so-called eclipse, specifically in areas where there are large congregations of people gathering to view it. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean cranking up the 5G on these people? Maybe. Does it mean releasing some illness that is contagious or a biological weapon of sorts? Maybe. Because, of course, as he states, then those individuals, again, go back home or wherever they live, and then they spread it to other people, and so on and so on and so on, and then, well, you have your quote-unquote disease X, or you have your manufactured crisis. Again, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anything is going to happen. I'm a better safe than sorry kind of guy. You wouldn't catch me out in a field around a bunch of these goons staring at the sun anyway. I can look at it anytime I want on my own property. If somebody wants to do that, that's fine. In this particular report that he brings, though, again, assuming he's telling the truth, what he does do, which is factual, is he ties in live local news affiliate reports, and you see the video and you hear the audio running, of how local areas who are in the so-called path of this solar eclipse are actually engaging in retraining and more training regarding first responder, whatever you want to call them, first responder techniques or crisis interventions or what have you. So, this is a thing that is happening. That's real, that's legit. Hooking it to a solar eclipse, I find to be outrageous. And then, of course, in the local Kroger's where I live, they have all of these solar eclipse t-shirts everywhere now. And buy your glasses and watch this DVD on solar eclipse or whatever the hell they have for sale. I put a picture of this up on Gab, a picture in the war video. I mean, that's a real thing too. So the propaganda regarding the solar eclipse is thick. And then you take into this account, ladies and gentlemen, you take into account the American public schools and even the colleges and universities, specifically K-12 schools all over the nation, even if they aren't in the path of this so-called eclipse, they are taking the day off. And again, the local school district where I live, they made mention of this back in November. And they said, the superintendent specifically, they said, well, we're going to be taking the day off and it's April 8th and we're doing it for safety reasons because people are going to be pulling over on the side of the road and they're going to want to look at it, and we don't want students getting in car accidents, and we just want to keep everybody safe. But don't worry, we're still going to have professional development that day for all staff members. So staff members have to show up if they don't take a sick day, but all the students get to go home. Again, he didn't make up that message. He didn't make that decision. He was told to make that decision. You follow my wavelength of thought here? So let's keep going. If a superintendent in a school district, and he's not the only one, my niece and nephew have the day off of school also, and they don't even live in the so-called path of this solar eclipse. They're just north of it, if memory serves. Doesn't matter. Everybody will be able to see it, for the most part. But either way, what entity, I should say, tells schools what to do and when to do it in unison? Again, what happened 4 years ago when schools were reading the same emails and then falling a line in unison? People should use this as an example to prove that American K-12 schools don't think for themselves individually, and that when they receive a memo or an email from somebody, it could be that the people controlling that somebody who wrote the email, who pushed it out to all these school districts all across the United States, could be working with the CIA. They could be working with Homeland Security and the Department of Homeland Security. They could be working with these three-letter agencies for not good reasons. This is something to, again, understand and consider. When they all fall in line regarding the same messaging, something doesn't smell right. I'm not saying something's going to happen. I'm just saying it's odd. That's all. It's very strange. And again, it proves that these people, again, who work for these school districts get these memos and they just go, okay, I was told to take the day off, so I'm going to spin it to make it sound like I'm the one who's helping everybody. And I'm the one who's trying to keep everybody safe, so we'll take the day off and the students will love me for it. Again, I don't know what's going to happen. But as you heard me read that state of Oklahoma news report from an Oklahoma newspaper last week, there were people actually saying, again, people associated with Homeland Security, that you should have 2 weeks of food and water on deck. For a solar eclipse? Really? What do you exactly have planned? That's my question. That's all I'm asking. So again, just keep it in mind, but this right here is part of the problem too. You send your children to these environments, you're getting yanked around by three-letter agencies. There's no doubt about that. So there you go. Okay. I want to mention this now. I found this to be fascinating as well, and you talk about word usage and rationalization. This is remarkable. A listener of the show, and they know who they are, they're an American patriot to say the least, and they work for one of these major companies, by the way, Tyson, and they are in the news with regularity, as I'm sure you're aware. They drive a truck for Tyson. And they, again, can see everything that's happening on a constant basis, and they've been watching the factories go down and all of that. But this is unrelated to that. They sent me this particular podcast that is titled The Common Sense Show with host Dave Hodges. And a few episodes ago, Dave Hodges had on Sarah Westall. And Sarah Westall and Dave Hodges were going after Amazing Polly St. George. And they were attacking Amazing Polly because Amazing Polly created, of course, this graph and a couple of episodes going after the wellness company and asking about their origins and where they came from and where their money comes from and where it goes and 1,000 other things and all of the, narratives and gatekeeping that they actually engage in. This is not difficult to comprehend. This is actually very straightforward, and it's a repeating pattern that happens throughout history regarding very serious subjects. With that said, Sarah Westall and David Hodges didn't really have a foot to stand on because they were trying to take the moral high ground. Sarah Westall was whining about how her face, was on this visual chart of people who were receiving money or kickbacks from the wellness company for, of course, their promo codes and advertising the wellness company. Sarah Westall later admits then that she hasn't been affiliated with a wellness company and receiving their promo codes and all of that stuff for at least 3 months. But she's still upset that Polly put her face on this giant chart of people who were, again, receiving kickbacks from the wellness company for promoting their products, which, by the way, are remarkably overpriced. Everything that the wellness company offers, you can get far more for far less just about anywhere else. So you can't say it's not about making money and scamming people. It certainly is. That's my opinion, and I'm entitled to it, but it's also just basic math. You can compare what they offer with what other people offer, and it doesn't match up. With that said, they continue to go on and attack Polly, and they make fun of her for not being a journalist and not doing her due diligence and this, that, and the other. Long story short with it, and I highly recommend you bounce over to that podcast, The Common Sense Show, and you give it a listen. They have 2 back-to-back episodes, but they say, it's the exact same thing in both episodes, so I don't know why they have 2 separate episodes uploaded. Either way, long story short with it, this is exactly what happens when someone is in the so-called truth media, as this Common Sense Show and David Hodges and Sarah Westall claim to be, to then only criticize someone for knowing more than what they know. And it shows that Sarah Westall and David Hodges were incapable of going down the rabbit holes that Polly was capable of going down and asking the questions that Polly was asking. So let me provide Sarah Westall and David Hodges another explanation that, of course, they don't know about, which is exactly why, in my professional opinion and humble opinion, as to why the wellness company exists and why they have the reins of the narrative right now. They hold the reins of the narrative because they are gatekeeping on the lie of virology. You see, David Hodges and Sarah Westall claim that the wellness company is basically putting a thumb in the eye of the pharmaceutical industry and taking them down. That's not true. What the wellness company is doing, and they know exactly what they're doing, they're profiting from the existence of an enemy. They're profiting from the existence of the pharmaceutical industry. So here's what I want you to imagine, just as a bit of a metaphor or an analogy, or however you'd like to phrase it, a visual example. The pharmaceutical industry is based on the lie of virology. That is quite literally the foundation. With that foundation completely destroyed, you have no pharmaceutical industry anymore. It's gone. You have no cancer foundations. You have no breast cancer walks. You have nothing. It all goes away. All the cancer hospitals, all the immunology, virology, XYZ, all of it's gone. All of it. But that's if you destroy the foundation of the lie. Unfortunately, the skyscraper that is the pharmaceutical industry, as we know, sits on top of that foundation of lies, the lie of virology specifically. All the wellness company is doing is throwing a rock through a window of that skyscraper and then profiting off of it. They're not actually going after the foundation, because if they did, that would bring down the pharmaceutical industry. That would bring down the false medical industry that exists in our country. But they're not doing that. Sarah Westall and David Hodges. They could do that. They have a lot of clout. They're finding their way into Washington, D.C. meetings with Senator Ron Johnson. They're rubbing shoulders with each other. You even have non-doctors rubbing shoulders with one another, like Jessica Rose and Dr. Brett Weinstein, who's a thought leader. Okay? I'm using huge quotes when I say thought leader. Again, as we know, Brett Weinstein went along with the lie. He believed it for a while, and then claims he woke up one day, all in an instant, and then presto changeo, he recognized he was being lied to and that there was a larger scheme behind all of it. Well, good for him. But Polly knows that this has been a lie from the start also. And Sarah Westall and David Hodges probably went along with the scare tactics and the lie to begin with, too. I don't know that for a fact. But you should never criticize somebody for knowing more than you. You should never criticize somebody for asking questions and then making statements and encouraging other people to ask questions. That's what Polly does. It's her bag. It's her thing. And it's perfect. I admire her work greatly. They even tried to disparage her by claiming that Polly's husband is associated with some Canadian government mercenary group that was involved with perpetuating the COVID lies. I mean, I have no proof of that, and frankly, that doesn't even make any sense. Now, I don't know what the man does for a living, and frankly, I could care less. I admire Polly's work, and she's right. She's not distracting people from something that is important. She's quite literally shining a light on a group of people that have all surrounded themselves with one another because they are, again, making money, maintaining the lie that is the foundation of the pharmaceutical industry. I can't wait for somebody like David Hodges, this David Hodges guy, and Sarah Westall to understand that viruses don't exist. And here's where you can tell that they think they exist, because they still say the words COVID and pandemic like they're real when they aren't. That's always the dead giveaway. That's the dead giveaway when someone doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. And here we are on the 4-year anniversary of this lie being implemented in society with lockdowns, shutdowns, school closures, businesses closing. Don't leave your house or your head's going to fall off. We're here on the 4-year anniversary of this lie, and people like them who claim to be in the alternative media, who claim to be journalists, still don't know that they were lied to and that COVID isn't even a thing. See what I mean? This is the division that exists. It's unfortunate. But just because some people are learning at a faster pace than others doesn't mean that you should disparage them in any way. And again, I understand people would say, well, Sean, you just made fun of them for not learning at the same pace that you learn and the same pace that Polly learned. Part of that's true. The other part of it, of course, which is accurate, is that I'm highlighting the fact that that shows their mental capacity. They ultimately stop thinking and stop asking questions, and then they just criticize. So my recommendation for the two of them, Sarah Westall and David Hodges, is that they need to keep asking questions. They need to keep thinking. They need to keep looking into things. This is important. They should do this. Because then you're going to arrive at a very horrific answer. Many of them, as a matter of fact. One of which, of course, is that cancer is curable. It's curable. And that the things that cause cancer are poisonous, of course, and are being pushed on us, and more impactfully, that the foundation of the pharmaceutical industry, that entire industry sits on, is the lie of virology. So if you want to find out more about that, well, you could read more or you could ask particular people questions. Again, it begs the question, why do you not see the likes of Dr. Thomas Cowan or Dr. Andrew Kaufman, talking with anybody on these mainstream platforms anymore about the lie of virology? They're probably tired of it, but they're not being invited because these groups of people associated with the wellness company don't want people to know that virology is a lie. That's why. Even Dr. Kerry Mullis knew that it was a lie. He knew that HIV wasn't real. Endless videos of him on YouTube discussing it very specifically. He even walked up to the late Luc Montagnier, if I'm saying his last name correctly. He walked up to Dr. Montagnier and at a particular conference, and he said, "You guys want me to write this particular paper about HIV causing AIDS, but I can't find anything that says HIV is actually real. Can you point me into the direction of proven research or written literature that says that HIV is real?" And you know what happened? They all walked away from Kerry Mullis. Luc Montagnier couldn't provide an answer to the question. And then, as Kerry Mullis describes, he says, honest to God, the colleagues around Luc, Dr. Montagnier, just looked at him like, why can't you provide him an answer? Because there was no answer, because HIV was fake. What caused AIDS? I've been over it on the show a million times. It was just poison. It was people poisoning themselves with hepatitis B shots, flu shots, inhalants, drug use, and that was about it. There wasn't even any proof that it was sexually transmitted, that any illness was sexually transmitted, although it could have been, but not HIV. It's just, again, electromagnetism and all of that. And I've been down that road before. So don't stop asking questions, and don't be quick to criticize individuals because they happen to call people out and have the courage to do that. And then, of course, again, make mention of things that maybe you haven't thought about before. So, yeah. Sarah Westall has more learning to do, apparently, and so does David Hodges. And, there you go. But again, congratulations to them on all of their paid sponsors and everything else and however they make their money. I mean, good for them. But again, some people just know more. Again, they also mentioned this in the podcast, which I found to be rather comical, is they said, we've reached out to Polly and we've invited her on the show and she can explain herself. Polly doesn't have to explain herself to anybody. And anybody who's ever watched Amazing Polly over the years, and I've watched her almost since the start. I mean, we're going back not quite 10 years, but close. We're coming up on it. It seems like it. She's been making videos a long time. She doesn't owe an explanation to anybody. In fact, she doesn't go on other people's shows, and the only other show I've ever seen her on is Quite Frankly. And she was on, I think, 2 or 3 times, tops. And that was just over the last few years. So again, she doesn't owe an explanation to anybody. She doesn't have to explain what she knows to you. It's ultimately the responsibility of the human being to figure this out for themselves. And then say, oh, wow, look over here. This person had this figured out before I did. Okay, great. I do that all the time. I learn something new and go, holy shit, look at all these people over here who had this figured out before I did. And then I share it with people. That's all. So I would encourage them to do that. Don't quit. Don't quit thinking and don't quit learning and then just arrive at a dead end of name calling. Go past it. Get past it. So there you go. That's my 2 cents on that issue. Okay. Couple of texts from AJ, our favorite California lawyer. Ladies and gentlemen, get a load of this. And yes, it's jab related. Yikes. And workplace related. Here's what he said. Quote, "Hey Sean, I listened to Wednesday's show today on my drive to visit Mom. You played audio on the teacher who got jabbed and now is awake and homeschooling her kids. He said, I met a home care nurse today who had a very similar experience after taking the jabs. Doctor told her that she had heart failure after performing several tests on her. She felt like something heavy was on her chest. Trouble breathing. Still not feeling like she used to and may not have many years left. But exercise and better nutrition helps a bit. She took the jabs to keep her job, not because she thought it would help others or that she was afraid of quote-unquote COVID. She told me some things that we already know, but was interesting hearing it from a nurse who until 2 years ago worked for Kaiser. One of her colleagues, a pharmacist, who is 36 and pregnant, got jabbed, then later walked into the break room and sat down. She kneeled over on the chair and died. What was the reported cause of death? Unknown. He then said, she said that nurses now know about the deadly jabs and do not want to take it. The medical director at one of Kaiser's departments refused to take the jabs. The administration threatened to fire him if he didn't get jabbed. He said, go ahead, I'm not taking it. They fired him. Then 2 weeks later, they asked him to come back. Why? Doctor shortage. I don't know if he returned or not. She also said that early during the pandemic, in April and May of 2020, we heard stories about doctors and nurses in New York dying of quote-unquote COVID. No, they died from the deadly antiviral medications given to anyone who tested positive or suspected of having COVID. He said, we also heard of the nursing home in Kirkland, Washington, and one out here in the Bay Area where like 30 to 40 patients died in one day, and they claimed it was COVID. No, it was the same medications, the one before remdesivir. And then he asked, was it quinine? And I said, no, I didn't think so. Quinine is what is in tonic water, and it's also in hydroxychloroquine, and it's good for you. But there were a series of drugs, of course, along with remdesivir that were immediately given to people. Morphine, of course, being one of them, and was, of course, immediately poisoning individuals, along, of course, with all of the intubation that was taking place regarding the ventilators, which was completely unnecessary. Not to mention, what did it say? I came across a thing the other day. It was even Dr. Kerry Mullis bringing up remdesivir again. That remdesivir back on the continent of Africa, when they were giving it to Africans for quote-unquote HIV, it was for Ebola. They were giving it to them for Ebola, and it was killing 53% of them. And it wasn't Ebola that was doing it, it was remdesivir. So it has a 53% kill rate. Again, greater than a coin toss. It just blows me away. He later texted me this. He said, I was just speaking with a 35-year-old Asian guy who used to work for Genentech. I'm saying that right. He's been married for 5 years, and his wife is 35 as well. He said they've been having trouble conceiving. Here's the kicker. He said 90% of their friends who live in the Bay Area cannot conceive and are using in vitro fertilization. He thinks that his friends not in the Bay Area are more fertile. He attributes it to stress. Next time I see him, I'm going to red pill him. And then he said, the in vitro fertilization industry must be booming. Yes, I think that's the case. And I think that it's a variety of things that of course, is keeping individuals who are of age to get pregnant from getting pregnant. Clearly diet and the food and the drink and the water that people consume, that plays a great role. Of course, the jabs, that goes without saying. I think 5G has a great deal to do with it also. In particular, of course, with sterilizing men and making women barren. There's no doubt about that. In fact, when AJ texted me that, it reminded me of a story that I just saw the other day, a couple of days ago on YouTube, and it had to do with fish in Key West. That there were fish now, or are fish down there, flipping out. They're just having these convulsions in the water. and they basically look like the men and women that we saw in Wuhan, China. Just kind of either not only just falling over, but flipping and twisting and rolling around when they kicked on the 5G over there, back again before 2020 and during 2020, in order, of course, to scare everybody about the quote-unquote COVID virus. The researchers down there in Key West regarding the fish, they're testing the water and they're testing the fish. And they're saying, well, we're not seeing anything unusual with the water. There's less to eat. And less of a vibrant environment in the water from time to time, but nothing necessarily unusual. And then they're testing the fish, and they're saying, well, there don't seem to be any viruses or bacteria or fungus growing on the fish, so we can't for the life of us figure out what's going on. I think this begs the question again that people are not considering 5G, that they aren't considering that that has an impact on all living organisms. It kills trees, for God's sakes. It can cook a human being from the inside out. Of course, it can cause a fish to flip out and lose control of its muscular system, and if it has one, and then of course it's certainly central nervous system, without a doubt. But again, 5G is the hidden element here. It's the hidden virus, the unseen illness. I believe Donald Trump even coined it that way, something along those lines. The invisible enemy, as it were. I'm linking it to 5G, him saying that, but he could have been referencing a million things back in 2020. But either way, 5G is one of those things, no doubt about it. And whoever is in control of it and turning it up, which we know it's government, yeah, it's going to have an impact on all organisms, no doubt about it. So, infertility, you bet. Fish flipping out in Key West, absolutely. But they're not even thinking about that. They're not even considering it. So, I'm not sure I have a ready explanation or certainly an answer to their problems other than they should take that into consideration and learn more about it. Turn off your Wi-Fi when you're sleeping at night. That has a lot to do with it. And I'm sure, of course, a lot of these homes have those smart meters attached to them. And in many cases, unfortunately, you don't even have a choice. You either have a smart meter on there permanently and there's no getting it off, or you typically have to pay a fee to maintain your older meter that is not a smart meter. So, yeah. Lots to consider here that unfortunately a lot of people just are not considering. Let me play this now, and I'm going to warn you, this is heartbreaking. It truly is. This is 8.5 minutes long, and this was from Dr. Mackis's Substack page, mackismd.substack.com. This is a male school teacher, former school teacher, who was forced to retire early after just taking one Moderna mRNA shot. His name is Casey. He lives in Los Angeles, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play this, and I'm going to encourage everybody to remember this fact. Like I said with the last audio from the previous school teacher that I played also. This is one school teacher, one person, one shot, in one state, in one district, in one county, in one city. Don't think for a minute this is the only person. If only one person here is coming forward like this, ladies and gentlemen, there are millions and millions and millions of people like this in this situation. And this is exactly why everything is happening the way that it is happening. I'd ask you to pray for this person too. This person that you're about to hear has tried to kill themselves twice. And they are out of the business now and had to retire and barely getting by and about to be homeless. Because again, they fell for the shot taking and they wanted to get back in the classroom and keep teaching. And they were told they can't return unless they take a shot. And they took it, and it's now cost him just about everything. So give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
All right, we are live. Can you tell us your name, please?
My name is Casey Corcoran.
And you took one Moderna COVID shot.
That's correct.
What made you think that was a good idea?
I didn't think it was a good idea. I was trying to get my job back as a teacher. I was forced into remote teaching, and I had difficulties with the administration at my school, which made the remote teaching much harder on me specifically. So I just wanted to go back to the classroom, and they said to get the shot, you have to go on campus. You have to get the shot to go back to your job. So I did.
So where did you get the Moderna?
I got the Moderna at a LUSD sponsored event in Long Beach, California, on March 9th, 2021.
And when you went to get the Moderna, did they take any medical history from you, or?
No, there was nothing. It was just stand in line and get the shot and wait 15 minutes afterwards.
When did you start to feel ill?
Well, I got the shot on a Tuesday. I went home. I had a chicken sandwich. Went to sleep. The next day, I woke up and I was like a split in two. My left side of my body was totally hurting and achy, and my right side was fine. So that was the next day, Wednesday. Thursday, I woke up and I attributed those Wednesday things to like what they attribute normal vaccine feelings. Right, you're gonna feel crappy. So Thursday, I woke up and my whole chest muscle here, from my sternum all the way to my armpit here, was twitching. The whole muscle, 24/7 for 9 weeks. Okay, amongst other twitches in my body. Nothing above my neck. Right, so it was just twitching everywhere, twitches. But this muscle here was twitching 24/7 for 9 weeks and 2 days, and it stopped. It diminished. It stopped, and I didn't use my arm. I realized when I used my arm, the twitching increases, so I stopped using my arm. And up until when the twitching was going on, I had no pain. It was just twitching all over my body, my back, my legs, abdomen, everywhere. And when the twitching stopped, that's when the pain started. And the pain started in my chest first, I believe. But it started in my chest, and I thought, wow, that's normal because the muscles have been going for 9 weeks consecutive. Maybe they're tired, right? So maybe it's just hurting from that. And then it just was spreading went into my whole arm, my hand, my chest, my upper back, started spreading around across my upper back. And that's when the side effects, and that's what's happened to me.
And so you were not able to go back to work?
My work denied me of my injuries. They gaslighted me. They wouldn't deal with my injuries. So they were trying to get me to take the second shot. And I said, fuck that. I'm not doing that. I didn't want the first one. So I retired. I got to the age of retirement a week before they were going to fire me. So I retired. Take that. But I lost my job. I mean, they forced me into retirement, which I wasn't ready to do. So I lost 7 months after I resigned in September of 21. For the next 7 months, I had no health insurance and no money because I hadn't planned on retiring, which I had to break up my retirement with my ex-wife. So it just complicated matters that they made me retire when I wasn't ready. I got a reduced, very small retirement after 27 years as a teacher. I got $2,000 a month. I can't live in LA on that. So then through the process of up until I tried to go back to work because there was no other answers for me. So I tried to go back to a teaching job part-time, but I couldn't even do that. I couldn't do it. It was just too painful. I just go home and lay down. So I don't work.
So what is a day in the life like for you now because of this one Moderna shot?
A lot of sitting around, laying down. Not much else. Sit around, lay around, try to be positive. Since the diagnosis, I realized that even me getting emotional like this is bad. From what they diagnosed me with, my sympathetic nervous system is on 24/7, just firing. Right. So any type of emotional stress, physical stress, financial stress, anything that gets my system kind of like where I am now, this just exacerbates the situation. So, sorry.
Well, do you mind me asking what your life was like before?
Yeah. No. I was active. I was a 54-year-old man. Active teacher. My body served. I biked. I walked. 3-4 times a week, 2-3 miles a day, 2 to 3 miles a time. I had kids. I led a normal life. Right? I was a teacher and I had summers off, and it was great. It was a nice life.
What advice do you give someone watching now that might have the same pressure you on? Go and get a
Man, I wouldn't do it. And it's not just me. Since I've had this happen to me, I've spoken to so many people around the United States, mostly, and even my neighbors and stuff. And I just watch these people go back for their boosters, and I'm just like, why? They're wondering why they're ill, and I'm like, hello, like, and it's not my spot to tell them, right? But at the same point, I realize the vaccines are doing this to you. I have two elderly neighbors on this side that they're both just so jacked up now. I mean, they've taken every booster, right? And they still wear the masks and everything. And I'm not against masks. I'm not against vaccines. I was a teacher, right? For 27 years, I took all the TB tests and whatever tests they wanted me to do. But I wouldn't do it. I mean, look at the outside of this bus, right? Come talk to me. Live a day in my life, and you'll not want to be in my body.
What's going to happen to you if you can't live on $2,000 an
Well, I'm about roughly, I would say 2 to 3 weeks. I'm gonna be homeless. I've I purchased a house with my mom, who's older, right? She's 81, and I was supposed to pay the nut on the house when I was with my job, and that's been almost 2 years, 3 years now that I haven't been able to pay anything, really barely anything. And so she's been footing the bill, and it's over. Right? She can't do it. It's over, and I'm getting gaslit by the medical community, blamed for my injuries based on prior injuries I had. It caused me to react like this, and so it's just pure hell. Like my relationship, it severed my relationship with my mom, right? Of financial strain. She can't do anymore, so that we lost the house. I was like, I lost the relationship more than that. I lost my fiance.
really has destroyed your life.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else?
Check my notes. Man, don't give up your autonomy for anything. Don't. Because it might not happen to you, but it could happen to somebody you love. And it has a lot of effects. It's not just me that's hurt. My children, my families, my friends. I've lost it's such an isolating thing with CRPS to go through. It's isolating. I've been suicidal for 2.5 years. And, I still get suicidal feelings, and I almost killed myself twice. And, it is what it is. I'm still here. So, that's, I guess, what I want to tell people is trust your gut feeling and don't give in to pressure. Just find another job. I wish I had, because I know people that didn't get the jab and they have better jobs, more money, their health, right, their career. I lost everything. So trust your gut feeling and don't trust the vaccine industry for sure. That's it.
I have nothing to add to that. I can't add anything to that I haven't already said. I feel terrible for him, and he's only one person. He's not alone. That's all over the world. Let me move on to this very quickly, and then I'll wrap this up. This was from nexusnewsfeed.com. It was titled, still is, of course, Mainstream Media Deathly Silent as PCR Test Legally Ruled Useless to Test for COVID. I hope some nurses and doctors just heard me say that. It says landmark legal ruling finds that COVID tests are not fit for purpose. So what does the mainstream media do? They ignore it. Again, this verdict was ruled in Europe, specifically Germany. And guess when it was ruled on? November 11th of 2020. Again, we've known about this that long. If not longer. Of course, Kerry Mullis knew it long before. And what'd they do to him? They killed him. Allegedly. Finally, there is this one. This is from Inside Paper, also not surprising. Surging nervous system disorders now top cause of illness, so saith a recent study. It says conditions affecting the nervous system such as strokes, migraines, and dementia have surged past heart disease to become the leading cause of ill health worldwide, a major new analysis said on Friday. More than 3.4 billion people, 43% of the global population, experienced a neurological condition in 2021, far more than had previously been thought, the analysis found. The study was carried out by hundreds of researchers led by the U.S.-based Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME. Now here's the kicker. Do they blame the shots? No, they don't. They don't blame the shots in this particular research article, not at all. They say it's a variety of reasons. Neonatal care, children dying more often. Diabetes is one of the major causes from poor diet, things of that nature. They never point the finger at the shot taking. And yet, of course, specifically with neonatal care, it certainly would be shot taking from the mother's standpoint, among, of course, endless other things. But they never point to the COVID jabs. No, can't do that. Don't want that cat to get out of the bag. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening again. Make sure and check the description below for that book list and that website that I referenced at the beginning of the show, and I will catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.